Hey everybody, welcome back to the Hard4Games channel. I'm your host Tony, and per the request of our patrons and thanks to Andrew E, we have two Wideboy 64 units to showcase to you all today. Not only are we going to be talking about those two units, but we are also going to have a special guest appearance by Gerry from Behind the Code. He's going to be showing off the successor to the Wideboy 64s, the Intelligent Systems AGB-CAPTURE device. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and play some Game Boy on the N64. So the units we have here are the Wideboy 64 CGB and AGB, basically Game Boy Color and Game Boy Advance. Now these were created by Intelligent Systems to give out to the press to allow them to basically be able to take a halfway decent screenshot for like magazines and reviews, etc. These were also utilized as a development tool. As you can see, these things are not consumer facing. They're industry tools, and that should be clear enough when you take a look at them and realize that the cartridge just like sticks out of the Nintendo cartridge that it's inserted into. These things are kind of ugly. You know, just because they're expensive as hell doesn't make them pretty. They were just insider tools that were never meant for you and I. Unfortunately, the labels are missing from the CGB, but the Advance unit still has them. Otherwise, the exterior is pretty typical. You know, you have a cartridge input, your Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance link cable connection, and I'm assuming these two little dots here on the CGB are the like infrared port. But if anyone can let me know if that's correct in the comments below, I would certainly appreciate it. So I'm going to showcase what these things can do. However, I'm not going to be giving an in-depth analysis of every single way you can play a Game Boy title on your television in comparison to these. Hey, come back here! If that's something that you want, if that's what you're looking for, I would recommend MyLifeInGaming's RGB-208 episode, which is essentially what they did. They took every sort of real non-emulation way to play a Game Boy title on your TV and they compared everything. So I would check that out. I'm gonna go ahead and put a link to that in the description below. But this is just going to be about what these can do, not in comparison to anything else. So this functions just like, well, you know, a Game Boy Color, or in the case of the AGB, a Game Boy Advance. But it does have some quirks. Now, obviously, regardless of the Wideboy unit you're utilizing, you're going to be stuck with the N64's output. So that's going to be RF, composite, or S-Video, unless you've got a modded unit. Mine's RGB modded, but of course, HDMI mods are also available, as I'm sure you are all well aware by now. So what you're seeing here is RGB that's been line quadrupled through an OSSC, and frankly, it looks pretty good, especially with the anti-aliasing turned off. So when you boot up, the N64 adds a heavy dose of anti-aliasing, which essentially just blurs the hell out of everything. Pressing L will toggle this on or off, and you're gonna want it off. It's actually really nice that Intelligent Systems gave us this option and had the foresight to do this. I do want to note, though, that if you do a hard reset of the console, the anti-aliasing turns back on, as you would expect, but you can also do a soft reset by pressing R and Z simultaneously. When you do the soft reset, the anti-aliasing turns back on, so if you reset, suddenly your image will be blurry again. Even with the anti-aliasing off, there are some graphical issues here that are, frankly, I would say, very niche and specific. The main issues here are dithering and flicker due to that dithering. Basically stuff that would drive John insane, but graphical issues that I don't really care about or notice unless I'm actually looking for them. Otherwise, it plays and it looks good. The sound can lack bass, but like the dither, I feel this is kind of nitpicky. And it's nitpicky for this reason. The CGB costs between $1,500 and $2,000 US, and the AGB costs around $4 grand. So if you're buying these, it's not because you're looking for the best possible way to play Game Boy or Game Boy Advance on your TV. It's because you're a collector and you're a hardcore fan of the Game Boy or the N64 or both. You know, so getting one of these and being like, oh man, like, it's a little tinny, the sound, oh, like, that's kind of, in my mind, complaining about that is kind of insane. I also feel like the audio is somewhat of a moot point in terms of its original purpose, right? So if this was designed, yes, for development, but also to allow the press to take screenshots of Game Boy titles, then the audio didn't really matter, right? It was just for visuals. So it's it kind of falls into that who cares category in my opinion. Unless, I mean, I guess, you know, if you're really diehard, you might care, but again, I think it's nitpicky. And speaking of its original purpose being primarily visual, at least for the press, you can zoom in or out of the image utilizing the analog stick. Here's my son zooming in and out because he thought it was hilarious and more fun than the game that he was playing. He's 3. Here are a few examples of games that I tested. First off, and probably most important, we have The Little Mermaid 2 Pinball Frenzy. Now, honestly, this is actually a pretty decent pinball title. Play it if you have not done so, if you're into pinball games. It also has a little rumble feature. You put a battery into the cartridge and it shakes. And all blown up, you can really see the use of color here. The beautiful use of color on these horrible, horrible images. Here is Pokemon Crystal, and this is the cart that I utilized to transfer all the Pokemon Center New York Pokemon to. Here are some of my transfers and some of my shinies that I got. And I do just want to say, since I have you all here, that I know that, you know, Pokemon Gold and Silver were Game Boy and Game Boy Color compatible, so there are some technical sacrifices that were involved in making it compatible to both. But Pokemon Crystal was Game Boy Color only, and it was supposed to be an enhanced version. You know, it had new animations, some new scenarios, but the use of color in this game is so lazy. So incredibly lazy. It is the most boring looking Game Boy Color game that I've ever played. Comparatively, here we have Zelda Oracle of Seasons. So much better, so much more beautiful, so much more vibrant, and it looks great on the Wide Boy. See, I circled it back around and connected that thought. All right, let's go ahead and boot up the AGB. So the anti-aliasing still applies to the Game Boy Advance version of the Wide Boy, but because the L and R buttons are equivalent to the L and R on a Game Boy Advance, you actually have to press Z this time around to get rid of that anti-aliasing blur. Overall, the games do look great though. The color really does shine through. And like an actual Game Boy Advance, this is backwards compatible. Game Boy and Game Boy Color games all work on this and have the same functionality. You can play them and toggle their aspect ratio. I also could not get that R and Z reset, that soft reset to work on this. I don't know if they removed it or I just couldn't get it to work or what was going on. So one of the last things I wanted to mention was this screen here. It's an Intelligent Systems splash screen, and I had initially seen it when I was watching and of course enjoying Shrek on Game Boy Advance video. I was watching it for my Will Shrek Game Boy Advance video play on a Wide Boy episode, which did surprisingly well. I don't know what is wrong with you people. So many people watched that episode. But basically, I was watching it, and it just changed to that. But the audio was still playing. It could still be paused and restarted, as if the movie was still running. But the visual was just the splash screen. And then I reset the console. I took it out, reseated everything, put it back in, and it worked fine. I never saw it again until I let my son play his Construction Zone game on the Wide Boy, which actually he really enjoyed playing it on the TV. He plays this little game all the time. It's probably his favorite game, definitely his favorite Game Boy game. But anyways, he was playing it, and he got further than he had ever gotten, and suddenly the game just froze. Like, he couldn't move the little construction vehicle around anymore. I'm like, what the heck's going on? Like, it's just not working. So I do the hard reset on the console, and it resets to this splash screen again. I'm like, oh my God, like, what the heck is this? And I had never seen it before. But then I realized that with other titles, when you boot up the game with the AGB specifically, not the CGB, just the AGB, you know, it will not showcase this at the beginning, but if you do a hard reset, it'll briefly, just for like 2 frames, flash that splash screen and then go to the regular boot up. It'll flash Intelligent Systems and then go to the regular boot up. And I never noticed it before because it's, again, very, very quick. So I guess when there's some sort of error, it just goes back to this splash screen. I don't know why. Some people had suggested to me that maybe this is what pops up when you don't have a cartridge in the actual Wide Boy, but no, it just boots up like a regular Game Boy. And other people suggested that maybe it's just a connection issue, but normally you notice that like at the beginning of boot up when the game doesn't load, like not 30 minutes in, just suddenly it goes to that splash screen is very strange. Again, it must be some sort of error state, but I'm not sure what activates it exactly. Other people that own Wide Boys that I've spoken to had never seen it, had never experienced it, so I don't know if there's something unique about this, or what. Maybe I'm just unlucky. I'm not quite sure. But either way, if you have any more information on that, obviously, let me know in the comments below. So I wanted to thank Andrew again for sending these over to me, and after playing them, I've determined that they are neat. As in, they're pretty cool, but my God, they are so expensive. Good Lord, they're not worth the price. I mean, they're really cool, and they're a nice piece of history, especially, you know, if you're really into the Game Boy or really into the N64. It's a nice little history piece to have in your collection, but good Lord. Like in terms of, you know, wanting to play, you know, Game Boy content on your TV, there are better options. Way better options. I'd recommend a Retron over this just because of cost. Just alone is just insane, you know. But regardless, thank you so much, Andrew, for sending this over. And I want to end this episode by sending it over to Gerry from Behind the Code, who's going to be talking about the successor to the Wide Boys. Because obviously, this is sort of a clunky setup. You have this big tall cart, you insert it here, you need an N64, you need everything that goes with an N64. It's a little bit of a cumbersome situation. So eventually, Intelligent Systems sort of wised up and evolved. So take it away, Gerry.
Hey, thanks so much, Tony. Appreciate the intro. Hey, everyone. Who the heck is this guy? My name's Gerry. I've got a background in digital electronics and also in industrial robotics. And over the years, I've developed a side hobby of doing a lot of development work with development systems from Nintendo, and I've been branching off into other systems as well. And so that's why I'm here. So today I'm going to be showcasing here the AGB-CAPTURE device. And so this is a piece of development equipment that was released by Intelligent Systems. And as Tony was saying, this was to essentially replace the Wide Boy 64. The primary reason for that was that they were redesigning the system anyhow because they wanted to incorporate a way of doing screen captures directly from the frame buffer and onto a development PC where it could be saved as a BMP image file. And so with all that development work going into a new PCB design and whatnot, the developers just said, you know what, it seems feasible for us to just completely redesign the system and go with a standalone system that would provide both features of streaming video to a television, but also providing an interface for doing screen captures directly from the game memory of the system. You would have a development PC that ran on Windows 95, 98 that was running a AGB-CAPTURE software. Now the version that I have here is actually in Japanese. Regardless, the software, as you can see here, while there was a game being executed and run on the unit, you could boot up the software and immediately start performing screen captures, capture as many screen captures as you need, and allowing developers to save those to BMP images and save them locally on the development PC. And on the back of the unit, there's actually a set of dip switches, and those were used for setting the SCSI ID number to prevent any kind of conflict between different and multiple systems. And there was also a set of dip switches that were used for configuring the color correction of the system. And that was primarily used when they would have the unit streaming a game at, say, a gaming expo, allowing the system to look a little bit more vibrant when performing a game demo. And so that is the AGB-CAPTURE device. So I hope you guys enjoyed that demo. Thanks so much, Tony. We'll see you guys later. Ciao.